The moon hung low above the rolling hills of Umbria, silvering the grass like frost. St. Francis walked the valley road alone, his sandals quiet against the soil, his breath faint in the cold night air. It was a night meant for silence, the kind of silence that allowed a man to hear the heartbeat of creation itself. Yet something was wrong. Francis stopped. The wind blew, stirring the cypress branches above him, and carried with it a sound unlike any he had ever heard. It was not the roar of wind against stone, nor the rustle of leaves. It was a cry, raw, mournful, stretched thin across the night like the lament of a mother losing her child. A wolf's howl. But no wolf stood in the valley. Francis peered into the darkness, his eyes adjusted slowly, seeking any movement along the slopes or among the shadows of the olive trees. Only stillness answered him. And then another howl, closer this time, echoing through his bones.
Francis clasped his hands at his chest. He had spoken to birds, deer, even the humble wild hare. He had embraced all creatures as brothers and sisters under one Creator. But this was different. This sound did not belong to flesh and blood. He whispered, "Who cries so desperately in the night?" For a moment, all became silent again, and Francis wondered if his mind had deceived him. But then came a sound softer than a whisper, yet filled with a sorrow so ancient it chilled his spirit. A whine, like a small cub left alone among hunters. Hunted. A voice seemed to breathe through the wind. Francis stepped forward instinctively, his heart tightening. There were no wolves known to wander this valley anymore. People told stories that decades ago a great hunt had wiped them out, driven by fear, pride, and sport. Since then, no living wolf had been seen near Assisi. Yet tonight, the valley cried with their voices. Francis knelt on the cold earth, the moonlight touching his face. He did not speak another word. He simply listened, because every cry, every creature, even those long gone, belonged to God. And somewhere in the darkness, something unseen watched him, waiting.
The howl stretched into a long, broken wail, no longer fierce, but sorrowful, like something remembering pain beyond measure. It rose from the hills, traveled through the cypress, trembled against the stones, and wrapped itself around St. Francis as though the entire valley itself were mourning. Francis stood slowly, his skin prickled as the sound turned from a single cry into many, overlapping voices, snarling, whimpering, then rising again into a lament so heavy it seemed the night sky dimmed beneath it. He swallowed hard. "These are not the living," he whispered. The wind answered with another cry, softer than before, as if confirming his thought. Francis closed his eyes and breathed deeply, opening not his ears, but his spirit. The world fell still. Then, as if summoned by prayer, the air itself thickened, and a faint shape shimmered in front of him, silver like the mist, but forming the outline of a wolf standing just beyond reach. Its eyes were hollow light. Francis took a cautious step. "Brother Wolf?"
The shape did not growl or move. Instead, a second voice joined it, then a third, and suddenly the night filled with cries, so many that Francis had to press a hand to his chest, as though the sorrow itself were too heavy to bear. "We were hunted," a voice echoed. "We were driven out," another groaned. "We were slaughtered," came a faint whisper, trembling like a cub. Francis's breath caught. These were not simple memories. These were confessions, spoken by spirits who had not left the earth. Then the valley shifted around him. The moonlight swirled like mist, and Francis was no longer standing in the quiet field of the present. Before his eyes unrolled a scene carved in spectral color, faded, flickering, like an old wound forced open. He saw wolves, real wolves, running through tall grass, a great pack moving swift as the northern wind. Their pelts shone under sunlight, proud and strong, free as God intended. But then came men, horses, crossbows, torches, flaming bright against the sky. The hunters shouted and charged. Arrows flew. Wolves collapsed mid-stride. A great alpha wolf turned to protect his mate and was pierced by iron, falling with a howl that shook even Francis's soul. Pups tried to flee, but were chased into corners of rock and earth. Francis raised a trembling hand. "Stop!" But it was only a vision, a memory forced upon him. He watched the slaughter unfold again and again, until the last surviving wolves vanished into shadows, and silence devoured everything that remained. The vision dissolved like smoke. The valley returned. Francis gasped as though waking from drowning. Before him stood several wolf spirits now, shimmering, hovering, their bodies broken, their eyes full of unspoken grief. "We have not rested," one murmured. "We died unjustly," another cried. "Our children hunted still." Francis bowed his head, heart pounding. "Then God must have sent me," he whispered, "and I will listen."
The largest of the spectral wolves, its form taller than the others, its fur a dim silver veil, stepped forward. Its eyes, dimmed by centuries of sorrow, rested on Francis. The creature did not speak aloud, yet Francis understood perfectly when it inclined its head and turned toward the northern woods. "Follow," a voice whispered inside his thoughts. Francis took a hesitant breath, then walked behind the shimmering figure. With each step, he felt himself leave the safe paths of Umbria and enter a wilderness humans no longer dared touch. The trees seemed older here, pressing close, muting the sound of wind, as though nature itself held its breath. The ghostly wolf stopped at a hidden opening between ancient pines. The moment Francis crossed it, every sound changed. The world behind him felt distant, almost unreal. Then the spirits faded. Silence pulsed, broken only by the faint crunch of his sandals against damp soil. Francis listened, waiting, and soon sensed presence, not ghostly, but alive, real. Soft rustles, shivering breaths. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to appear smaller. His heart beat faster, not out of fear, but reverence. And then he saw them. Half hidden behind thorny underbrush, a pair of glowing eyes reflected the moonlight. Real eyes, not the spectral kind. A wolf's face, narrow with hunger, cautiously emerged. Its ribs showed through its fur, too thin, too weak. Behind it came another, smaller, trembling. Francis pressed a hand to his chest. These were no spirits, they were survivors. The wolves backed away at his slightest movement, their bodies quivering. Their ears flattened, tails low, ready to run. Francis could almost feel the fear vibrating through them, the instinct born not from centuries of nature, but from generations of human cruelty. "Peace," he whispered. "I will not harm you." One wolf let out a soft growl, not aggressive, but warning. Then Francis noticed her. A mother wolf, larger than the others, stepped forward. Her body was scarred, fresh wounds and old ones sown by time. She did not growl. She simply stood between Francis and the younger wolves, blocking them from view. He could see her sides heaving with exhaustion, yet her gaze was fierce, unwavering, a living shield of fur and bone. Francis met her eyes, not like a man confronting a beast, but like one soul recognizing another in suffering. The mother wolf's gaze held pain, fear, but above all, love, primal and pure, the kind any mother would give her children. Francis bowed his head, not daring to reach out. "You are mothers," he whispered gently, voice breaking, "and I am only a brother." The wolves watched him, trembling, uncertain. But they did not run. For the first time, a fragile thread formed in the darkness, between fear and faith, between man and beast. Somewhere behind the trees, the spirits watched in silence, waiting to see what Francis would do next. Rumors spread quickly through the scattered villages near Assisi. Shepherd boys claimed to have seen St. Francis walking beneath the pines at night, speaking softly into the wind as though holding counsel with unseen beasts. Others swore they heard strange howls echoing after his prayers, sounds not heard in Umbria for decades. By sunrise, the whispers had reached the taverns, and by noon they reached the hunting lodge of Lord Riccardo di Montanaro, the most feared and celebrated hunter in the region. The man laughed at the rumor, slamming his goblet onto the wooden table. "So," he sneered, "the holy friar thinks himself protector of wolves now." The other hunters chuckled, though uneasily. Riccardo had earned prestige by leading the last great wolf purge years ago. In his mind, wolves were trophies, symbols of man's dominion over nature. Their extinction was a badge of masculine triumph, a testament to human superiority and strength. A younger hunter spoke cautiously. "They say he found survivors, my lord, real wolves, not ghosts." Riccardo's eyes hardened. "Impossible. We ended them all." "But if he is protecting them—" Riccardo stood abruptly, as though struck. The idea that a humble friar might undo his legacy ignited fury inside him. He paced before the hearth, jaw clenching. "For years they called me the Wolf Hammer. I will not be mocked by a holy friar and his childish mercy." He ordered his men to saddle horses. "We ride tonight. If there are wolves left in Umbria, we finish what we began." Another hunter, older and more thoughtful, hesitated. "My lord, the people revere Francis. If they learn we disobey his wishes—" Riccardo cut him off. "A man proves his worth against the untamed. Wolves are not creatures of God, they are beasts born to challenge us. To hunt them is not cruelty, it is honor." The hunters nodded, bound by pride, tradition, and fear of Riccardo's wrath. By dusk, a group of armed men rode into the forest, torches blazing like war banners against the fading sky. Their dogs strained against leashes, already catching scent of something wild. Unaware that the valley itself had awakened and watched under St. Francis's protection. Night fell again upon the hidden grove, and Francis remained among the trembling wolves, offering silent prayers while the mother wolf guarded her pups with restless eyes. A cold hush swept suddenly through the trees. The air thinned, then stilled. Francis felt it before he saw anything, a presence returning from beyond. The silver figure of the old spirit wolf materialized beside the tree line, luminous and grave. Its voice did not sound like speech at all, more like wind scraping against ancient stone. "Brother Francis." Francis bowed his head reverently. "You returned." The spirit stepped closer, its eyes burning with sorrow. "Save them, or none will remain." Francis froze. The words were not plea, but warning. "What danger? They are hidden here." The spirit wolf lowered his head as though ashamed to speak. "Humans come, men with fire and iron. They move as hunters at night, following the scent of blood and the pride of conquest." Francis felt a sharp ache in his chest. So the rumors had traveled back, and the hunters had not forgotten their ancient war.
When? Francis asked. The answer came not in words, but in a vision. Torches moving through the dark forest, dogs snarling, men chanting with cruel excitement. The name of Ricardo echoed like thunder in the spirit's memory. "They are close," the spirit breathed. "They plan to surround the grove before dawn." Francis looked back at the living wolves, thin, terrified, defenseless. He thought of the pups unable to run far, of the mother already wounded. He could sense her fear as clearly as prayer. "This is not hunting," Francis whispered, voice trembling with indignation. "This is slaughter." The spirit wolf lifted its fading head toward the moon. "They will not stop until every heart here is silent." Francis rose to his feet. "Then we must move them." The spirit turned away, disappearing slowly into mist. "Go, Brother Francis. Time flees like the frightened deer. If you delay but hours, none will remain." Francis did not hesitate another moment. He pressed his hand gently to the mother wolf's shoulder, as if asking her trust, and then he began leading the last living pack deeper into the dark, racing against both night and human cruelty.
Francis stepped out from the shadows of the forest into a clearing where torches glimmered against the dark trees. There the hunters waited, horses restless, dogs snarling, weapons gleaming like shards of anger. Lord Ricardo stood at the center, arms crossed, eyes sharp as a hawk. "Ah," Ricardo said, voice mocking, "the holy friar himself comes to plead for beasts that do not even exist." Francis bowed his head slightly, his gaze steady but gentle. "I come not to plead, my lord," he said quietly. "I come to speak for those who cannot speak themselves." Ricardo laughed, a harsh bark that startled even the dogs. "Ha ha! Speak? You? What could a barefoot monk possibly teach men like us about strength, courage, or honor?" One of the younger hunters snickered. "Perhaps he wishes to pray the wolves into submission?" Francis met their ridicule with calm eyes. "Every creature, whether man or beast, bears the mark of God, and to kill without need, to destroy what cannot defend itself, that is not strength, it is cruelty." The hunters shifted uneasily, but their pride was thick. Ricardo stepped forward, leaning on his spear. Cruelty? Ha! We hunt because it is our right, because we are men, because the forest obeys us, or it dies. The weak have no place here, friar. This is nature's law.
Francis shook his head, heart aching. No, my lord. God's law is mercy. His creation is to be cherished, not conquered. Wolves, deer, birds, they are brothers and sisters. They breathe because He allows it. Their lives are not trophies for human pride. Ricardo's laugh turned bitter. Mercy? Words for children and saints. Words for men who fear to face the wild as it is. Do you think your prayers will shield them from my bow? Do you think your soft hands can guard against what is necessary? Francis stepped closer, voice firm, yet trembling with sorrow. It is not necessary to kill for sport. True courage lies in restraint. True honor lies in protecting the weak. You call this sport, but it is sin. The hunters exchanged glances and jeered. Sin? You dare accuse us, monk? One spat. We have survived generations by our skill and strength. And you, what do you have? Words and humility? Francis did not flinch. I have prayer and I have love, and I will not stand by while innocents are slaughtered. Ricardo barked another laugh, eyes cold. Then watch, friar. Watch while men do what men must. Wolves are meant to die, and tonight your mercy dies with them. Francis bowed his head, silent but unyielding. He knew this confrontation was only the beginning. The forest held its breath, awaiting the night to decide between man and beast. Night fell like a heavy curtain, and the hunters moved through the forest with the precision of men accustomed to death. Torches flickered, casting long, jagged shadows that danced among the gnarled oaks. Dogs barked and strained against their leashes, eager for blood. Spears and bows glinted in the firelight, sharp and unyielding. The wolves, already thin and frightened, sensed the approaching danger. They huddled together, ears flattened, teeth bared, muscles taut with instinctual terror. The mother wolf growled low, warning her pups to stay hidden, yet they whined softly, trembling with fear. Francis ran through the underbrush, heart pounding. Every branch seemed to grab at his robe. Every stone threatened to stumble. He called out to the wolves in whispers, soft and urgent. "This way, my brothers! Keep moving! Keep safe!" Above him, the wind carried the echoes of the hunters' shouts. "They're here! Surround them! No mercy!" The dogs lunged, and Francis could hear the crack of branches as the men pressed deeper.
The pack scattered in panic, darting through shadow and undergrowth, driven by fear and desperation. The mother wolf led her young as best she could, weaving between trees and leaping over roots. Francis followed, calling upon God to guide them. He prayed aloud, voice trembling with urgency. "Lord, protect your creatures. Let them see the dawn. Let their lives not be in vain. Watch over them, I beg you." A sharp whistle from the hunters split the night. Dogs barked closer. Francis's heart sank, and his breath came in ragged gasps. He felt the thin line between life and death pressing upon them all. Branches tore at his robes and whipped against his face, but Francis did not falter. His prayers intertwined with every step, every movement, until the mother wolf sensed his presence. She paused just long enough to glance at him, eyes glimmering with silent understanding. Then she darted forward again, her pups at her side, and Francis continued behind, a steadfast shadow in the darkness. The forest seemed alive with tension. The cries of the wolves, the barking of the dogs, the men shouting commands. And yet, amid the chaos, Francis pressed on, a lone figure in the cold night, carrying hope like a lantern in his heart, chasing the living spirits of God's creation through the shadowed Umbria woods.
As Francis and the living wolves pressed deeper into the forest, a sudden hush fell over the valley below. The hunters' shouts echoed, fading briefly, as if the world itself had paused to listen. Then it began. From the peak of the northern ridge, a flicker of white light shimmered through the trees. At first, Francis thought it was the moon reflecting off distant snow, but the glow moved, rising, forming shapes both familiar and impossible. Ghostly wolves materialized, their forms luminous and ethereal, hovering above the forest floor. Francis fell to his knees. He could feel the presence of the spirits, ancient and sorrowful, yet full of power. The air vibrated with energy, a deep resonance that seemed to reach into the heart of every living creature in Umbria. The wolves' cries began, a howl unlike any he had ever heard. It was high and terrible, yet filled with grief and authority, carrying across the valley like a living wind. The sound rattled the trees, shivering through stone walls and rolling hills, echoing farther and farther, until every village and farm lay under its mournful shadow. The hunters froze mid-step. Torches trembled in their hands. Dogs whimpered and refused to move forward. The men's courage faltered, as if the very forest had risen against them.
Ricardo's voice trembled with fury and disbelief. "What sorcery is this?" he shouted, raising his spear. But no answer came, only the haunting chorus of spectral wolves. Some hunters dropped to their knees, clutching their heads, overwhelmed by a terror they had never known. Others turned and fled blindly, stumbling over roots and stones, abandoning their dogs and weapons in a panic. The white light grew stronger, illuminating every tree, every rock, revealing the path Francis had led the living pack along. The ghostly wolves circled the ridge, their forms weaving together into a shimmering barrier of protection. It was impossible to see where one ended and another began. It was as if the spirits themselves had become a single living shield. Francis whispered a prayer, eyes lifted toward the luminous shapes. "Lord, let your creatures be safe. Let mercy prevail over pride and cruelty." The mother wolf glanced at him, then led her pups through the hidden trail revealed by the spirits. Francis followed, heart pounding, and for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope in the dark. Behind them, the hunters' panic had turned to chaos. Torches were thrown, weapons dropped, and Ricardo himself staggered, wide-eyed, finally realizing the full weight of what he faced. The forest, the spirits, and God's own justice had claimed the night. And above all, the cry of the spirits echoed, resounding through Umbria, a lament, a warning, and a victory all at once.
The forest grew tense with anticipation. Francis led the surviving wolves through twisted roots and shadowed underbrush, each step measured and silent. Yet the hunters were not far behind. The mother wolf paused, ears twitching, sensing the approaching danger that even human eyes could not yet see. Then the air shifted. A sudden gust swept down from the northern peaks, rattling branches, scattering leaves, and whipping the cold night into a frenzy. The wind grew stronger, growing into a gale that howled through the valley like the voice of God himself. Torches sputtered and went out. Hunters struggled against the force, their horses snorting in panic, their dogs yelping and tugging against leashes. Francis raised his hands, letting the wind pass through him, whispering prayers of guidance and protection. Lord, shield them, guide them. Let your creation flee safely from those who would harm it. The storm seemed to obey, twisting the forest paths, tearing down obstacles, and covering the scent of the wolves from the bloodhounds that had caught their trail. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, drumming against the leaves and masking every footstep. Mud churned beneath Francis's sandals, slowing the hunters, while the wolves moved effortlessly, slipping through the chaos as if carried by unseen hands. Francis watched the mother wolf lead her pups toward a narrow ravine, hidden between jagged cliffs and overgrown ferns, the secret route he had discovered days before. The wolves ran with renewed courage, their fear tempered by the miraculous cover of wind and storm. Behind them, the hunters cursed, stumbling blindly in the rain, unable to follow the path, their voices swallowed by the roaring wind. Ricardo swung his spear, but the storm tore it from his hands, sending it spinning into the dark woods. Francis ran beside the wolves as they entered the protected ravine. He whispered encouragement, feeling the connection between the living creatures and the spirits that had guided them. The pups scrambled, the mother wolf nudged them forward, and all were safe at last within the narrow, concealed gorge. Francis paused at the entrance, soaked and breathless. The wind calmed as quickly as it had risen, leaving only the soft patter of rain on leaves and the distant, frustrated cries of the hunters lost in the valley. He fell to his knees, bowing his head. Thank you, Lord, for their lives, for their freedom. The wolves huddled together, trembling but unharmed, their safety secured by the storm, by the spirit wolves, and by the mercy Francis had carried into the night.
Lord Ricardo had become separated from his men, stumbling through the dark forest, rain-soaked and exhausted. Every shadow seemed alive. Every snapped branch whispered warnings. The wind had died, leaving only a heavy, oppressive silence that pressed upon his chest. Then, ahead, a faint glow appeared, pale, white, impossible. From it, the spectral wolves emerged, their forms shimmering, ethereal, and terrible. The largest stepped forward, eyes blazing, not with malice, but with quiet accusation. Ricardo froze. His spear slipped from his grasp, clattering uselessly to the wet ground. The spirit wolf did not move closer, did not attack. It merely stared, its gaze piercing through pride, ambition, and denial, seeing straight into the heart of the man who had taken so much. For long moments, Ricardo could not speak, could not move. The silence weighed heavier than any chains. Then, with a trembling voice, he whispered, I was wrong. I hunted what I should have protected. I have sinned. The spirit wolf lowered its head slightly, a silent acknowledgement, and the glow began to fade. Ricardo sank to his knees, shivering in the darkness, alone with the weight of his conscience, realizing that the night and the spirits had passed judgment upon him.
Francis returned to the valley under the pale light of the moon, the forest quiet yet alive. From the distant ridge came a howl, long, clear, and free. But it was no longer a cry of sorrow. It sang of life, of survival, of mercy fulfilled.
The spirits of the wolves rose once more, their forms luminous, circling above the hidden ravine where the living pack rested. With a final haunting glance at the friar who had saved them, they dissolved into the silver light, leaving only the gentle rustle of leaves and the eternal echo of their howl across Umbria.